cool. It's about 54 degrees. The wind is starting not to become in my favor, which it was different when I came out here and checked it a little bit ago. But we'll have to see what goes on. When the sun starts coming up, I'll start rolling more film. When you were hunting and this is all you heard around your hunting area, some fucking guy in a helicopter flying low as fuck. Like that. Why? I don't know. Roll call 219, and if you can see in the beginning of the video, it was promising. The wind was kind of shifting a little bit, but it wasn't too much of a big deal. And then the animals didn't cooperate, and then people didn't cooperate, especially people that fly helicopters. So in a nutshell, it was a bust day. There's a couple things working against me. The wind kind of shifted in the real early morning. What I'm catching on my trail cams is deer coming in later in the morning, around 6:45, 7 o'clock. So I figured I would have plenty of time, so I kind of got up around 4:30, waited to get in the shower till about 5:30, was out of the door at 6 o'clock. Sitting there around 6:15, it was still really dark, and I was like, man, I hope the sun comes up pretty quick, just in case they're early. And they were early. Out of the corner of the woods I was sitting at, I could see one little black blob walking through, and I'm like, oh, that's a deer. And I looked back at my shoulder, looking at the sun, like, come on, you know what I'm saying? This is the first time I wanted the day to get started pretty quick. And then I saw another one at the end of the field, and then another one was coming through, and they were not being quiet at all. You could really tell that there's deer coming through with the crunching of leaves. And finally it started to get a little bit lighter out. Looked at my clock, still wasn't within shooting time, and then all of a sudden it got really light out, and these two other yearlings come scraping out of the woods, really young deer, and they're hopping around, they're playing in the field, and they're getting started with their day. And the deer started to group up a little bit, and then when these two deer came running out the woods, it kind of spooked the other deer, and then they went into the group and they started agitating the older deer, and then the older deer were chasing them, and they were running from each other, and it was almost like controlled chaos at that point. Nobody wanted to stand still, nobody wanted to stop and feed. It was like, oh God, here comes, I don't know, Laverne and Shirley out of the woods, messing our day up. So they all kind of started to splice off into different directions. Then they grouped up to a point where they were about 25 yards from me, which is really shootable. But then they were all clumped together again. And being ethical, I didn't want to just put an arrow into a group of deer. It's really low visibility. In the state of Indiana, you can shoot half hour before sunrise and a half hour after, and we were right on that cusp. But by the time the deer started to kind of calm down, they just kept on walking. The other two deer that came flying out of the woods, they were still doing their thing, and the other ones still got agitated, so they just moved off. And I was like, oh man. So went back to a different spot, checked the cameras real quick on those, sat down, checked the cameras, noticed that there was going to be some other deer that were moving through the area around hopefully 7:30ish. At this time, it's starting to get up in temperature. In the morning, we were hovering around 54-55 degrees with a southeast wind, which it's all right for the first spot. But the second spot, it'd be really tough. So I really had to mask my scent to the best of my ability. But as my, I came back home, I went to the bathroom because the early morning portion of the hunt was done. I went outside to put my boots on because my son was getting picked up on the bus, and he said, there's deer in the field. So I walked out there, get my boots on, ready to go over to the field, and all of a sudden that helicopter came through, and it just scraped that field. What they were looking for, I have no idea. There has been some crime that's been happening in town, but it usually doesn't work its way here. It usually ends up people get in a car and they take off down the highway, and they go towards Chicago or South Bend. So I don't know what he was doing, and if you can see at that picture, I thought he was either going to crash or he was going to hit the wires and the poles. That's how close he came to the ground. What he was doing, I don't know, but that was a really, really discouraging factor. And as I started going down the driveway, I should have filmed that. He came back for a second pass. And as I crested the driveway and looked, the deer were just scattering on his second pass. I don't know who owns that helicopter. I don't know. Maybe I'll go back through the footage and see if I can see a number on the tail or whatever. But that's really, really odd that would happen. Sometimes in policing, they'll use a FLIR helicopter to look for marijuana crops, and sometimes they'll have to get pretty low to stick that thing down there to try and get some heat indication off of there. But that's the only thing that I can think about that they were doing. But flying that low, I mean, at that point, I would actually I'd actually file a claim to the DNR and say, these people are, they're harassing hunters at this point, whether they wanted to do it or not, if they didn't know what was going on or not. I think that's detrimental. And that's one of the things that you just have to deal with in hunting. When people disturb you hunting, that's a crime. Laws are laws, unless they change them, that's the law. It's what's on the book, because you can't harass hunters and you can't make spots, whether public or private, unhuntable by the harassment technique. And that, I don't know what that was about, especially when he came back a second time. He was a little bit higher the second time. I wish I would have got the phone out and filmed him the second time. He was a little bit higher, but still, it's like, that's an open field and the crops have been knocked down. There's really, the leaves are really turning and they're falling. So I don't know what he was looking for. Again, I didn't know if he was going to do an emergency landing, which, I would have went over there and helped in some form or fashion, or called it in. But it didn't seem that way when he went by the second time. So very disappointing. Again, I'm an ethical hunter. I'm not going to just take a shot with a bunch of deer huddled together. That's irresponsible as a hunter, and you don't want to do that. Especially if I'm going to tag a deer, I'm going to make sure, first of all, the deer is old enough, and it's not something, fawnish or, a really young yearling to the point where I'm not going to get as much meat off of it. So today was just another disappointing day. Plus, in the middle of the day, around 12:30, 1 o'clock in the afternoon, the temperature just rose to about almost 78 degrees. And for people that aren't too familiar with hunting, if you shoot a deer in that kind of temperature, you're gonna have to try and track it pretty quick. I mean, unless it drops there on the spot, it could happen. The deer will start getting to be bloated, and it'll be a lot harder to gut it and field clean it. So at that point, I was like, it's not worth my time. It's too hot. So I waited in the evening. 2 deer showed up in the evening. They're about 60-70 yards out, and that's a no-go, and they just kept on going. So the wildlife didn't quite do what it was supposed to do, and human beings were awful annoying today. I love to get out in the woods. That's why I like to go, because there's usually no human beings where I go. But unfortunately, sometimes they pop up. So, and I did see some turkeys today. We went and got some stuff from Cindy's mom's house. They'll be moving here soon to a different location. And when we pulled up into the driveway, there's a bunch of turkeys there too. So I got a turkey tag and 3 deer tags to fill this year. So hopefully it'll all pan out here coming down to the next few weeks and then into the rut. Right now we're getting into the pre-rut when everybody's mingling about and seeing where they want to go. And hopefully we can be more successful and human beings kind of taper off. But it was a bust today. So we'll have to see in the next coming weeks. I only have a couple of days off next week. So that's really going to depend on how it's going to go. And plus, I've seen the temperatures for next week. And again, 80 degrees, 85 degrees, man, that's really tough hunting conditions. So this one might be prolonged here. And I'm hoping not. I hope today I could at least get one animal done and out of the way, whether it was a turkey or a deer, one of the two. But we'll have to see coming up. I'd like to thank all my old and my new subscribers and just the people that zip through. I greatly appreciate it. Please like, comment, share, and subscribe. The content, hit the bell if you want more notifications and you want to be a part of the Rohirrim. Hopefully coming down here we'll have a little bit better action than low-flying helicopters. All right. Like always, guys, we'll catch you on the next one.